My mother hijacked my fully paid $7,600 wedding venue for my sister's baby shower, claiming her pregnancy eclipsed my marriage. I smiled, agreed, and then called the owner to cancel everything, setting a devastating trap they never saw coming. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The air in my living room was thick with the scent of dried eucalyptus and hot glue, a stark contrast to the sterile, medicinal smell that had clung to me for the past 3 weeks. I was 32 years old, an architectural draftsperson by trade, but right now, I was just a woman trying to breathe. I was slowly recovering from a brutal bout of pneumonia that had left me bedridden, draining my physical strength and leaving my nerves raw and exposed. My hands, still slightly trembling from the residual weakness, were meticulously tying silk ribbons around the thick, cream-colored cardstock of my wedding invitations. Each ribbon felt like a tiny victory, a promise of the beautiful future Elijah and I were building. The venue was secured, the catering was finalized. After years of putting everyone else first, this was my moment. Then, my phone buzzed on the kitchen island. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother, Naomi. I hesitated. A conversation with Naomi was rarely simple. It was usually a tactical negotiation disguised as maternal check-in. But craving a moment of normalcy, I cleared my scratchy throat and answered. "Hi, Mom. I'm just finishing up the..." "Emilia, darling, listen closely because I have a lot of moving parts to coordinate today," Naomi interrupted. Her voice was brisk, carrying that signature tone of breathless importance she used whenever she was orchestrating someone else's life. There was no, "How are you feeling?" No, "Are you still coughing up a lung?" Just straight to business. "Okay," I said slowly, setting down a pair of gold-handled scissors. "What's going on?" "It's about Brooklyn," Naomi said, her tone instantly softening into the reverent hush she reserved exclusively for my 27-year-old sister. "She went to the doctor this morning. The morning sickness has been just dreadful for her, you know, she's so delicate. Anyway, she's further along than they thought, and we realized we need to move the baby's shower up. Significantly." "Oh," I rasped, taking a shallow breath that burned the edges of my lungs. "Well, I'm glad the baby is healthy. Let me know the new date, I'll make sure I'm free." "Yes, well, about that," Naomi chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that instantly made the hair on my arms stand up. "We were looking at venues, and everything is just so terribly booked. But then I remembered. You have that gorgeous estate reserved for the 14th of next month. The one owned by your old friend. It's absolutely perfect for a garden-themed shower." My brain struggled to process the words. "Mom, the 14th, that's my wedding day. That's the day Elijah and I are getting married." "I know that, Emilia," she sighed, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a stubborn toddler. "But you have to look at the bigger picture. Brooklyn is bringing new life into this family. A baby is a miracle. A wedding is just a party, and frankly, you and Elijah have been living together for 3 years anyway. What's the rush?" The room seemed to tilt sideways. The gold-handled scissors slipped off the counter and clattered loudly against the hardwood floor. Are you asking me to cancel my wedding so Brooklyn can have a baby shower?" "Cancel? Heavens no, don't be so dramatic," Naomi scoffed. "I'm saying we are using the venue. You can still get married in the morning, maybe just a quick ceremony off to the side by the gazebo, and then we will transition the main hall for the shower guests by noon. I've already invited 50 of our closest friends and family. It's a combined celebration. Though, obviously, the focus will be on the baby. Her baby is more important, Emilia. You must see that." A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. My chest tightened, not from the pneumonia, but from a suffocating wave of pure, unadulterated shock. I had spent $7,600, my entire savings, on this venue. I had worked overtime drafting blueprints late into the night just to afford the deposit. and my mother was simply commandeering it, hijacking the most important day of my life for my sister's baby shower and expecting me to just smile and step aside. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking, tears of absolute disbelief springing to my eyes. "I paid for that venue. It's my wedding." "Oh, stop being so selfish for once in your life," Naomi snapped, her veneer of sweetness vanishing entirely. "Your sister is highly emotional right now. Waylon is stressed about his new job, and they need this. I've made the decision. We will be there at noon on the 14th. I expect you to be accommodating." The line went dead. I sat there in the deafening silence of my living room, the half-tied silk ribbons mocking me from the counter. The physical illness that had plagued me for weeks felt trivial compared to the hollow, aching void that suddenly opened up in my chest. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain ever could. For what felt like hours, I couldn't move. I just stared at the blank screen of my phone, my mind trapped in a chaotic loop of denial and devastation. My breathing grew shallow and rapid, each inhale sending a sharp pain radiating through my recovering lungs. I wrapped my arms around my torso, shivering violently despite the warm afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. It wasn't just that Naomi was demanding my venue. It was the absolute, casual certainty with which she did it. She knew I would cave. I always caved. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted me out of my spiraling thoughts. Elijah walked in, dropping his leather briefcase by the console table. He was a tall man, 34, with kind eyes and a patience that I often felt I didn't deserve. He took one look at me, pale, shaking, surrounded by abandoned wedding invitations, and rushed to my side. Emilia, hey, what's wrong? Are you having trouble breathing again? Do we need to go to the hospital?" His hands were warm on my shoulders, grounding me. I shook my head, fresh tears spilling over my cheeks. "Not the hospital," I choked out. "My mother." It took me 10 minutes to get the story out, interrupted by jagged breaths and fits of coughing. As I repeated Naomi's words, "Her baby is more important, Emilia. You must see that." I watched Elijah's face transform from deep concern to a quiet, simmering fury. His jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle jumping near his temple. "She invited 50 people," Elijah said, his voice dangerously low, "to our wedding venue on our wedding day." "Without asking," I whispered, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "She just told me it was happening." Before Elijah could say another word, my phone rang again. It was Brooklyn. Elijah reached for it, his eyes flashing, but I put a trembling hand over his. "No, I need to hear this, I need to know." I took a deep breath, hit accept, and put the phone on speaker. "Hey, Em," Brooklyn's voice bubbled through the speaker, overly bright and entirely oblivious. In the background, I could hear the muffled voice of Waylon, her husband, complaining about something on the television. "Mom said she talked to you. Isn't it so exciting? The baby is literally the size of an avocado right now." "Brooklyn," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Mom said you're taking over the venue on the 14th. "I know, it's such a relief," Brooklyn sighed dramatically. "I was stressing so hard about finding a place, and Waylon was getting super anxious about the budget, but Mom said you were totally cool with sharing. Or, like, stepping down a bit. I mean, we're going to need the main dining hall for the gift opening and the games, so you guys can just do your vows out back, right? It won't be a big deal." "Not a big deal." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "Well, yeah, I mean, you and Elijah are practically married anyway," she said, echoing our mother's exact phrasing with chilling precision. "And honestly, being pregnant is so exhausting. I need a day that's just perfect and stress-free for me and the baby. You understand, right? You're my big sister." The coldness of her entitlement washed over me, freezing the last remnants of the warm, familial love I had desperately clung to. She wasn't asking for a favor. She wasn't even apologizing for the intrusion. She was simply claiming what was mine, fully expecting me to hand it over on a silver platter, because that was the dynamic we had operated under our entire lives. "Right," I said softly, staring blankly at the wall. "A perfect day." "Awesome. Mom is handling all the vendor coordination from here on out so you don't have to stress your little sick lungs, Brooklyn added cheerfully. Love you, M. Bye. The call ended. Elijah stared at me, waiting for me to break down completely. But the tears had stopped. A strange, icy calm was beginning to settle over me, replacing the panic and the hurt. I looked down at the beautiful invitation in my hand, at the intricate gold foil lettering that proudly displayed the name of the estate owned by my former boss, Riley. Naomi and Brooklyn thought they had outmaneuvered me. They thought they had cornered the meek, accommodating Emilia, who would rather sacrifice her own happiness than cause a family scene. But they had forgotten one crook. I'll thing. To understand how Naomi could audaciously hijack my wedding day, you had to understand the 32 years of conditioning that preceded it. I was the eldest, the capable one, the strong one. In Naomi's eyes, this didn't mean I deserved respect. It meant I required zero maintenance and possessed an endless capacity to absorb the burdens of others. Brooklyn, 5 years my junior, was the opposite. She was the sensitive one, the creative soul who needed constant buffering from the harsh realities of the world. When Brooklyn crashed her car because she was texting, it was my savings account that drained to fix it, because Naomi claimed the stress of a lawsuit would ruin Brooklyn's aura. When Brooklyn and Waylon couldn't make rent because Waylon decided to quit his job to become a full-time crypto trader, they moved into my tiny apartment for 6 months. I slept on the sofa. Naomi praised me for being such a good anchor for my sister, while she herself contributed nothing. Naomi was a master of the graceful grift. She called herself a holistic energy guide, a vague profession that seemed to involve drinking expensive herbal teas with wealthy, lonely women and validating their worst impulses in exchange for generous donations to her practice. She never had a steady income, yet she always wore pristine, tailored linen suits and smelled of bespoke jasmine perfume. She floated through life on a cloud of manufactured spiritual superiority, expertly manipulating everyone around her to foot the bill. The morning after the phone calls, the doorbell rang. I was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in a heavy cardigan, drinking hot water with lemon. Elijah had gone to work, leaving me strict instructions to rest. I opened the door to find Naomi standing on my porch. She looked immaculate, as always. Her hair was perfectly blown out, and she wore a soft cashmere wrap draped elegantly over her shoulders. She held a single, overpriced green smoothie in one hand and a thick leather folio in the other. Emilia, darling, you look positively ghastly, she announced, breezing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. You really need to cleanse your space. The energy in here is incredibly stagnant. No wonder you're holding onto this chest infection. What are you doing here, Mom? I asked, closing the door and leaning against it, too exhausted to deal with her performative concern. I told you yesterday, I'm taking over the vendor coordination, she said, setting her smoothie down on my pristine wedding invitations and opening her folio. I need the direct contact information for Riley. I need to speak with her about changing the menu. Brooklyn cannot tolerate the smell of roasted garlic right now, so the chicken course is out, and I need to adjust the floral arrangements. Brooklyn finds lilies depressing. She wasn't asking, she was dictating. I watched her flip through her notes, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against the leather. Riley wasn't just a venue owner. She was my former boss and a dear mentor. Before I transitioned to architectural drafting, I had worked as a senior event coordinator at Riley's estate for 5 years. Riley had seen me through my grueling night classes. She had cheered for my successes. When I got engaged, Riley had insisted on giving me a massive discount on the estate, personally writing up a heavily customized contract just for me. You can't just change the menu, Mom, I said carefully, testing the waters. The catering is finalized and paid for. Oh, please, Emilia, everything is negotiable. Naomi waved her hand dismissively, her eyes scanning my kitchen as if pricing the appliances. Just give me Riley's cell phone number. I'll explain the situation to her. She's a reasonable woman. I'm sure she'll understand that a high-risk pregnancy takes precedence over a party menu. Besides, we need to talk to her about the deposit. My blood ran cold. The deposit. Naomi finally looked up, fixing me with a look of feigned, condescending patience. Yes, the deposit. Since we are essentially taking over the primary use of the space, Waylon feels that the deposit should be transferred to their name, just for liability purposes, of course. It's just paperwork, Amelia. Don't look so panicked. Now, Riley's number, please. She didn't just want the venue. She wanted control of the contract, and by extension, she wanted to steal the financial equity I had built into the event. She was looking at me not as a daughter whose heart she was breaking, but as a resource to be plundered for the benefit of her golden child. The polished, disingenuous smile on her face made my stomach churn with a sudden, violent clarity. She wasn't a mother trying to navigate a difficult family dynamic. She was a parasite disguised in cashmere. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and the final thread of my lifelong compliance snapped. I stared at Naomi, Taken. G and the serene, unbothered expression on her face. For 32 years, I had interpreted that look as maternal wisdom. Now, the illusion shattered, leaving behind nothing but the cold, calculating reality of her manipulation. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was demanding a sacrifice. I don't have Riley's personal cell phone number synchronized to this new phone yet, Mom, I lied. My voice was surprisingly steady. The tremor from my illness completely vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. It is saved on my desktop computer in the home office. I will need to boot it up and email it to you later this afternoon. Naomi sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of profound inconvenience. Really, Amelia? You are terribly disorganized for someone who claims to be a professional. Fine. Email it to me by 3 o'clock, and do not contact Riley yourself. You are far too emotional right now, and I need to handle the vendor transitions smoothly so Brooklyn doesn't absorb any of your negative energy. With a final, disapproving glance at my comfortable cardigan and the scattered wedding invitations on the counter, she turned on her heel and let herself out. The heavy front door clicked shut behind her. I stood frozen for exactly 1 minute, listening to the sound of her expensive tires crunching against the gravel driveway as she pulled away. Then, I moved. I didn't walk to the home office. I walked straight to my bedroom closet, pulled down a fireproof lockbox from the top shelf, and entered the combination. Inside rested a thick, pristine manila envelope containing my venue contract. Naomi assumed I was a passive participant in my own life. She assumed the contract was a standard, boilerplate agreement that could be swapped and traded like a family recipe. She didn't know that I had spent 5 years working as the senior event coordinator for that exact estate. She didn't know that Riley, the owner, was not just a vendor, but a fierce mentor who had practically forced me to read every line of legal text before signing. I pulled out the crisp pages and flipped directly to page 4, section 7, cancellation and transferability. I ran my finger under the bolded text. This agreement is strictly non-transferable. In the event of a cancellation initiated by the primary signee, all secured dates will be immediately released, and any refunded deposits will be returned exclusively to the original method of payment. There would be no name change. There would be no transfer of funds to Waylon's bank account. Naomi's grand plan hinged on a legal impossibility. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Amelia, my favorite bride, Riley's booming, cheerful voice echoed through the speaker. Tell me you're finally over that awful cough. I've been saving a special vintage of sparkling cider for our tasting next week. Riley, I said, my voice dropping to a serious, hollow register. I need to cancel the wedding, all of it. The line went dead silent for a long moment. When Riley finally spoke, the cheer was entirely gone, replaced by the sharp, authoritative tone of a seasoned businesswoman. What happened? Did Elijah do something? A genuine, albeit brief, smile ghosted across my face. No, Elijah is perfect. It's my mother. And my sister. I spent the next 20 minutes detailing every agonizing word of Naomi's demand: the hijacking of the date, the 50 guests, and the ultimate, sickening request to transfer the $7,600 deposit to cover Waylon and Brooklyn's needs. "That absolute vulture," Riley hissed, the sound vibrating with pure disgust. "I remember your mother from the company holiday parties, always lingering near the expensive hors d'oeuvres, looking down her nose at the staff. She actually thinks she can commandeer my property and extort your money. She's taking over the vendor coordination today. She's expecting me to give her your number so she can change the menu and take the deposit," I explained, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Let her call," Riley said, her voice dripping with ice. "But we are invoking Clause 7 right now. I am officially canceling your event in the system, Emilia. I am processing a full 100% refund of your $7,600 back to your credit card immediately. It takes 3 business days to post." "But Riley, if you cancel it—" "I am not telling her," Riley interrupted, catching my drift perfectly. "If that woman calls me, I will be polite. I will take her little menu changes. I will let her believe she has the run of the place. But on the 14th, those wrought iron front gates will be padlocked shut. Now, why on earth does Waylon need your deposit so desperately?" That question hung in the air after we hung up. Why the deposit? Why not just use the venue for free? I sat at my laptop and started digging. Waylon loved to brag about his cryptocurrency ventures on social media. It did. And take long to find his public business pages, which led to a trail of increasingly desperate forum posts under his usual username. Then, I checked the county public records for their rental address. My breath caught in my throat. There it was. A formal eviction notice filed against Waylon and Brooklyn, dated 2 weeks ago. They weren't just moving. They were being thrown out for 4 months of unpaid rent. Waylon's business hadn't just stalled, it had catastrophically failed, wiping out their accounts. Naomi wasn't just planning a baby shower. She was organizing a desperately veiled cash grab to save her golden child from homelessness, and she was using my wedding funds to do it. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. I had texted Brooklyn earlier, asking her to come over so I could give her the vendor files. I needed to see her face. I needed to know if she was a willing co-conspirator in this financial theft or simply a pawn in Naomi's elaborate, frantic cover-up. Brooklyn stood on the porch, looking unusually disheveled. The glowing pregnancy aura she constantly bragged about was entirely absent, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a nervous, jittery energy. "Hey," she mumbled, stepping inside and immediately sinking into the closest armchair. "Mom said you're being difficult about the caterer. Please don't make this hard, Em. I'm so exhausted." I sat across from her, resting my hands on my knees. "I'm not being difficult about the caterer, Brooklyn. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. You mentioned Waylon was stressed about the budget. Is that why Mom wants to transfer my $7,600 deposit into your name?" Brooklyn's eyes darted away, fixing on a spot on the rug. "It's just for liability. Mom said the venue requires the primary user to hold the deposit. Waylon is going to pay you back after the shower. We're asking for cash gifts for the nursery, so we'll have plenty." She was lying, but she was bad at it. Her hands were trembling. "Brooklyn," I said softly, leaning forward, "I know about the eviction." Her head snapped up, the color draining completely from her face. "What? No, we aren't. Waylon is just looking for a bigger place. A more premium neighborhood for the baby. Mom is helping us." "I checked the county court records, Brooklyn. It's public information. You are being evicted in 10 days for non-payment of rent. Waylon's accounts are empty." I kept my voice perfectly level, stripping away any accusation and leaving only the cold, hard facts. "Mom isn't throwing you a baby shower. She's staging a fundraiser to pay your rent, and she's trying to steal my wedding venue and my savings to make it look like you aren't completely broke." Tears instantly welled in Brooklyn's eyes. "Stop it, you're just jealous. You've always been jealous that Mom pays more attention to me. Waylon is brilliant, the market just dipped." Right on cue, as if summoned by her golden child's distress, Brooklyn's phone rang. The screen flashed Naomi's name. Brooklyn scrambled to answer it, putting it on speaker with shaking hands. "Mom," she sobbed. "Brooklyn, darling, what's wrong? Are you at Amelia's?" I felt a terrible disturbance in your energy. Naomi's voice cooed smoothly through the phone. "She knows about the apartment, Mom," Brooklyn cried. She looked it up. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. When Naomi spoke again, the holistic sweetness was entirely gone, replaced by a vicious, cornered hiss. "Amelia, you vindictive little snake. How dare you snoop into your sister's private affairs? You have no idea what you are talking about." "I know you're trying to use my wedding deposit to pay off Waylon's massive debts," I replied clearly, leaning closer to the phone. "And I know you're lying to 50 people about the nature of this baby shower." "Listen to me very carefully," Naomi snarled, her voice dropping to a desperate threat. "You will not breathe a word of this to anyone in the family. Waylon is merely executing a strategic relocation of his assets. If you ruin this shower for your sister, if you try to humiliate her, I will make sure the entire family knows exactly how selfish and unhinged you have become. I will ruin your reputation, Amelia. You will hand over that deposit, or you will regret it." It was a pathetic, empty threat. She had nothing to use against me, and her immediate resort to bullying only confirmed her absolute guilt. I looked at Brooklyn, whose tears had momentarily stopped as she stared at the phone in horror, hearing the sheer venom in her mother's voice. "My reputation is just fine, Mom," I said, entirely unbothered. I reached over and tapped the red button, ending the call. The days leading up to the 14th were a masterclass in escalating delusion. Naomi, seemingly convinced that her threats had silenced me, shifted into overdrive. She sent out formal digital invitations to all 50 guests. They were lavishly designed, boasting about the exclusive garden estate, and prominently featuring a link to a registry that consisted entirely of a nursery cash fund. She was brazenly soliciting thousands of dollars from our relatives under false pretenses. Meanwhile, the $7,600 had quietly reappeared in my bank account. Riley had kept her word perfectly. When Naomi called the venue to demand the menu changes, Riley's assistant had politely taken down the notes, confirming the date and time without ever mentioning that the event had been wiped from the master ledger. But the cracks in Naomi's carefully constructed facade were beginning to show, primarily through Brooklyn. 2 days before the scheduled shower, Elijah and I were sitting in the living room, quietly packing a few bags for a weekend getaway we had planned with the refunded money, since our wedding was officially postponed. My phone buzzed. It was Brooklyn. "Amelia," her voice was barely a whisper, thick with exhaustion and quiet despair. "Can I come over, just me, please?" When she arrived, she looked completely defeated. She didn't sit, she just stood awkwardly near the entryway, wringing her hands. Waylon finally told me the truth," she choked out. "The business is gone, all our savings are gone, the eviction is real, we have to be out by Monday." I felt a pang of genuine pity for her. She had been spoiled and entitled, yes, but she was also incredibly naive, entirely dependent on a mother who fed her delusions and a husband who lied to her. "What did Mom say when you confronted her?" "She told me not to worry," Brooklyn sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "She said the baby shower cash fund would cover the back rent and the deposit for a new place. She said your venue deposit was going to be transferred to us tomorrow to cover Waylon's immediate loans. Amelia, she told me you agreed to it. She promised me." "I never agreed to anything, Brooklyn," I said firmly, walking over and handing her a tissue. "Mom lied to you. She lied to everyone." "I don't know what to do," she cried. "Mom called a family meeting tonight at the house to finalize the timeline for the shower. She wants you there." Elijah stepped forward, handing me my coat. "Then we'll go," he said, his voice a steady, reassuring rumble. "It's time to end this." We drove to Naomi's house in silence. When we walked into the dining room, Naomi was sitting at the head of the table, looking incredibly tense but trying to mask it with a serene smile. Waylon sat next to her, looking pale and distinctly unwell. "Emilia, Elijah, how nice of you to join us," Naomi said tightly. "I assume you brought the venue's authorization forms. Waylon needs to sign them tonight so the funds can be released tomorrow." I didn't sit down. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. I didn't have authorization forms. I had printouts. I tossed the folder onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "There are no authorization forms, Mom," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "But there is a copy of Waylon's failed business filings. There is a copy of the public eviction notice. And there is a copy of my original venue contract." Naomi's serene mask violently shattered. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "How dare you bring that garbage into my home? I told you." "You told me you were taking my venue," I interrupted, my voice rising, finally letting out the anger I had harbored for weeks. "You told me you were taking my money. You manipulated Brooklyn. You lied to our entire family to cover up Waylon's spectacular failures, and you thought you could just bully me into funding your cover-up." "It is for the baby," Naomi screamed, her face turning an ugly, mottled red, dropping the spiritual guru act completely. "You selfish, ungrateful brat, we need that money." "You can't have it," I stated plainly, looking her dead in the eye. I reached out and tapped the venue contract resting on top of the pile. "Read Section 7, Mom. The deposit is non-transferable. It cannot be moved to Waylon's name. It cannot be used for your party. It belongs to me." Waylon buried his head in his arms. Brooklyn stood frozen in the corner, staring at our mother as if seeing a monster for the first time. Naomi lunged for the papers, her hands shaking with a mixture of rage and absolute panic. "It doesn't matter what this piece of paper says," she shrieked. "We have the venue on Saturday. The guests are coming. We will figure the money out later, but you are not ruining this event." I looked at her desperate, frantic face, and I felt nothing but a cold, profound sense of closure. She still didn't understand the depth of her miscalculation. She still thought she held the winning hand. "Okay, Mom," I said quietly, turning to leave with Elijah. "Enjoy the shower." Saturday the 14th, dawned W. Ith clear, cerulean skies and a crisp, gentle breeze, the kind of picture-perfect weather I had prayed for when I first booked Riley's estate. But as Elijah and I drove up the winding, tree-lined country road toward the venue, my stomach wasn't fluttering with bridal nerves. Instead, a profound, unwavering calm had settled over my entire body. My lungs, finally clear of the lingering illness, drew in deep, steady breaths. I was no longer the accommodating, silent daughter. I was the architect of my own liberation. We hadn't gone to the estate to celebrate, nor had we gone to cause a scene. We went because I knew Naomi. I knew that even faced with the undeniable truth, she would try to spin a narrative of my sudden, cruel abandonment to the family. I needed to be there to ensure the truth was the only thing standing when the dust settled. As Elijah's car crested the final hill, the chaotic scene came into full view. A line of nearly 20 vehicles, luxury SUVs, sleek sedans, and practical minivans, was backed up along the shoulder of the narrow road. Up ahead, blocking the grand entrance, stood the towering, wrought-iron gates of the estate. They were chained shut with a massive, gleaming silver padlock. A crowd of about 50 people, dressed in pastel garden party attire, milled about the gravel driveway in utter confusion. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends were checking their phones, murmuring to one another and shading their eyes from the midday sun. And right at the center of the commotion, wearing a pristine, pale yellow linen suit that was rapidly succumbing to nervous sweat, was Naomi. She was rattling the heavy iron bars, her voice shrill and completely devoid of its usual holistic serenity. Behind the gates, standing perfectly still with his hands clasped behind his back, was Riley's head of security. He looked entirely unimpressed. Elijah parked our car a short distance away. He reached over, taking my hand and giving it a firm, reassuring squeeze. "You ready for this?" he asked softly. I've been ready for 32 years, I replied. I stepped out of the car. The crunch of my shoes on the gravel seemed to act like a beacon. Conversations halted. Heads turned. A ripple of whispers cascaded through the crowd of guests as they spotted me. I wasn't wearing a wedding dress, nor was I wearing garden party attire. I was dressed in a sharp, tailored blazer and dark jeans, looking exactly like the professional woman Naomi had always resented. "Emilia," Naomi shrieked, spotting me through the sea of confused relatives. She pushed her way through the crowd, her face a mask of furious indignation. Waylon trailed anxiously behind her, looking as though he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. Brooklyn stood a few paces back, clutching her purse tightly, her eyes wide and terrified. "Emilia, thank goodness," Naomi loudly projected, immediately attempting to control the narrative for the audience. "Tell this absurd security guard to open the gates immediately. Riley is playing some sort of sick, unprofessional joke. The caterers are supposed to be setting up. My guests are waiting." I stopped about 5 feet from her, letting the silence stretch until the only sound was the rustling of the leaves in the wind. I looked around at the faces of my extended family, people who had watched me quietly sacrifice my own needs for decades. "There is no joke, Mom," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the gravel driveway. "And there is no event. Not today, not here." "What are you talking about?" Aunt Susan, Naomi's older sister, stepped forward, adjusting her floral sun hat. "Naomi told us your wedding was delayed and you graciously offered the space for the baby shower." I turned my attention to my aunt, offering her a polite, entirely steady look. "Aunt Susan, I never offered this space. Mom demanded it. She found out 3 weeks ago that I had fully paid a $7,600 deposit for my wedding here today, and she decided to hijack the venue behind my back." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Naomi's face turned an alarming shade of magenta. "Lies, she is lying. Emilia is having a mental breakdown because of her illness." "I am perfectly healthy," I continued, raising my voice just enough to cut through Naomi's panic. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a neatly folded stack of papers. "What Mom didn't tell you is why she needed my wedding venue so desperately. She didn't invite you all here today to celebrate a baby. She invited you here to solicit thousands of dollars in cash gifts because Waylon and Brooklyn are entirely broke." "Shut your mouth," Waylon yelled, finally finding his voice, though it cracked pathetically. "Waylon's cryptocurrency business failed months ago," I addressed the crowd, unfolding the papers and holding up the county court seal for anyone close enough to see. "They haven't paid rent in 4 months. They are being legally evicted on Monday. Mom tried to steal my wedding deposit and use your nursery fund, registry donations to bail them out and cover up the fact that her golden son-in-law bankrupted his family." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. You could hear a pin drop on the gravel. I watched the realization wash over the faces of my relatives. They looked from me, standing calm and resolute, to Naomi, who was trembling with a mixture of rage and sheer terror, and finally to Waylon, who had buried his face in his hands. "Is this true?" Uncle David demanded, turning a harsh glare on Naomi. "You asked us for $1,000 for a premium stroller, Naomi. Were you going to use that to pay this boy's rent?" "It's a temporary cash flow issue," Naomi stammered, backing up against the iron gates, her polished facade crumbling into a pathetic, desperate scramble. "Family helps family. Emilia was being entirely selfish. She doesn't even need a big wedding." "But I did need my savings," I said coldly. "Which is why I called the venue owner, my former boss, and canceled the entire contract days ago. The money was refunded to me. There is no party. There is no catered lunch. There is nothing here for you, Mom." Suddenly, a choked sob broke the silence. The crowd parted slightly, revealing Brooklyn. She was staring at Naomi, her face pale and streaked with fresh tears. The illusion she had lived under her entire life, that she was the center of our mother's universe, protected and cherished, had just been violently shattered in front of 50 people. You used my baby, Brooklyn whispered, her voice shaking with a devastating mixture of heartbreak and absolute betrayal. You used my pregnancy to try and steal Amelia's wedding. You told me she agreed to it. You swore to me she wanted to help us. Brooklyn, sweetheart, please, Naomi pleaded, reaching a hand out toward her younger daughter. I was protecting you. You are too fragile for this stress. Don't touch me, Brooklyn screamed, the sound raw and piercing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't whining or deflecting, she was standing up. She ripped the delicate floral corsage Naomi had pinned to her dress that morning and threw it onto the gravel. She turned a venomous glare on Waylon. And you lied to me for months. You let my sister's wedding get ruined to hide your failures. Brooklyn turned back to me, her eyes overflowing. Amelia, I am so sorry. I was so stupid. I am so sorry. Without waiting for another word, Brooklyn turned on her heel and began walking rapidly down the shoulder of the road, away from the venue, away from Waylon, and most importantly, away from Naomi. The spell was broken. Disgust replaced confusion among the guests. Uncle David shook his head in profound disappointment, turned, and walked back to his car. Aunt Susan gave Naomi a look of withering contempt before following suit. One by one, the crowd dispersed, the sound of starting engines and crunching gravel filling the air. I stood there for a moment longer, watching Naomi. She was completely alone, standing in front of the locked gates of a party that didn't exist, her reputation in tatters, her manipulative web entirely unraveled. She looked small. She looked pathetic. I turned my back on her, took Elijah's hand, and walked to our car. We drove away, leaving her in the dust, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The downfall of Naomi's carefully curated kingdom was swift, absolute, and entirely self-inflicted. By Sunday evening, the family group chat, which I observed from a detached, peaceful distance, had become a tribunal. Relatives who had contributed heavily to the nursery fund registry contacted the hosting website, citing fraudulent solicitation. The platform immediately froze Naomi's account, locking away the funds pending a full investigation. Word spread quickly. Naomi's Holistic Energy Guide business, which relied heavily on word of mouth among the wealthy, gullible socialites in our hometown, dried up overnight. No one wanted spiritual guidance from a woman who had publicly attempted to scam her own family to cover up an eviction. Within weeks, she was forced to list her expensive, pristine house for sale to cover the mountain of debt she had secretly accumulated trying to maintain her wealthy facade. Waylon and Brooklyn's eviction proceeded precisely on schedule that Monday. But in a surprising twist of fate, Brooklyn didn't crumble the way Naomi had always predicted she would. The shock of the public confrontation at the gates had acted as a brutal but necessary wake-up call. 2 weeks after the non-event at the estate, I was sitting in a quiet, sunlit corner of my favorite local coffee shop. Elijah was at work, and I was enjoying a moment of solitude with a book when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Brooklyn standing nervously near the entrance. She looked vastly errant. The designer maternity clothes she usually flaunted were gone, replaced by simple, comfortable leggings and an oversized sweater. The arrogant, bubbly entitlement had vanished from her eyes, leaving behind a sobering maturity. She spotted me, hesitated, and then walked over. "Hi, Em," she said quietly, her voice tentative. "Can I sit?" "Of course," I replied, closing my book and gesturing to the chair across from me. She sat down, wrapping both hands around her growing belly in a protective gesture. We sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of the espresso machine filling the space between us. I didn't rush her. I let her find the words. "I left Waylon," she finally blurted out, a single tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. "He wanted me to beg Mom for money to stay in a hotel. He still wouldn't take a job that he thought was beneath him. I realized I didn't want my baby growing up watching that. And I didn't want my baby growing up watching me act the way I've acted toward you my entire life." I took a slow, steady breath. This was the sister I had always hoped existed beneath the layers of Naomi's toxic conditioning. Where are you staying? With Sarah from my old yoga class. She has a spare room. I got a job, just part-time data entry, working from home, but it's something. I'm saving for a small apartment before the baby comes. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, raw and honest. I'm not asking you for money, I promise. I needed to see you to say thank you. You exposing Mom at the gates. It was the hardest day of my life, but it saved me. I was asleep, Amelia. I let her turn me into a monster. I am so deeply sorry for what I tried to take from you. The apology was genuine. It carried the weight of true remorse, not the manufactured guilt Naomi used as currency. I reached across the small cafe table and gently placed my hand over hers. I accept your apology, Brooklyn, I said warmly, feeling a genuine smile touch my lips. I love you, I always have, but things have to be different now. I can be your sister, I can be an aunt to this baby, but I will never be your safety net again. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. I know, she nodded fiercely, squeezing my hand back. I will, I promise. Over the next few months, true to her word, Brooklyn began to rebuild her life independently. It wasn't easy, and there were struggles, but she was doing it without Naomi's poisoned assistance. As for Naomi, I officially blocked her number the day after the showdown at the gates. I felt no guilt, no lingering obligation. I had finally severed the puppet strings she had attached to me at birth. As for my $7,600, it didn't stay in my savings account for long. 6 months later, on a breathtakingly beautiful afternoon, Elijah and I stood on a secluded, sun-drenched cliffside overlooking the crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean. We hadn't rescheduled the massive, stressful family gathering at Riley's estate. Instead, we took the refunded money and flew across the country for a private, intimate elopement. The wind whipped through my simple, elegant white dress as I looked into the eyes of the man who had stood by me through the darkest, most chaotic moments of my life. There were no caterers to manage. There were no seating charts to agonizingly arrange to avoid family feuds. There were no manipulative mothers demanding the spotlight. It was just me, Elijah the efficient, and the rhythmic, endless sound of the ocean. When Elijah slipped the gold band onto my finger, a profound, unshakable sense of peace washed over me. I had lost a wedding venue, and I had lost the illusion of a supportive mother. But in return, I had gained my freedom, I had gained my self-respect, and I had forged a future that belonged entirely, unashamedly to me. I had survived the fire, and standing there in the sunlight, I had never felt more alive.